Is finding your dream career feeling impossible right now? You're not alone. Welcome to Career Blueprint, the podcast that helps you figure out your next career move. We explore the trends in tech shaking up the job market, giving you the unfiltered advice you need, whether you're starting out, changing direction, or guiding someone else. Let's figure out what's next for you together. This is Career Blueprint. In our past episodes, we've been focusing on how AI is impacting and sometimes eliminating jobs. But at the same time, we know AI is also creating new jobs, and it's even creating new companies. So today, we're going to talk about AI startups and how artificial intelligence is accelerating the launch of software startup companies by making it faster and cheaper to build software solutions. Now, it's hard to exactly estimate how big the AI startup wave really is because there's no single comprehensive database tracking this type of information. And many startups are at early stages and aren't public about their activities yet. But we can get a reasonable estimate from a company called Traction, a market intelligence platform that tracks private companies, startups, and emerging technologies. Venture capital and corporate investors use their data to understand the startup environment. So, using Traction's data, there are roughly 33,000 new AI companies around the world. And 2,000 to 3,000 new AI companies are launching every year. Traction's data shows that these new AI startups are creating a wide variety of business products. They're not just building chatbots. They're also building all the architectural plumbing we need for an entirely new AI economy. And they're focused on applications for almost every industry you can imagine. All of this product development activity is causing a bit of an AI gold rush. AI companies raised $163 billion in AI projects in 2025 alone from venture capital. This is higher than venture capital investment levels during the height of the internet.com era in the late 1990s. And it doesn't count all the infrastructure being built to support artificial intelligence, like data centers. According to Traction, most of that AI investment is concentrated in enterprise software, IT services, fintech or financial technology, customer support and sales, healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, and retail. Now, those are all traditional industries, but there still are some surprising applications out there, like companies that are building AI applications to help struggling bee populations pollinate crops, and AI applications to help cities manage traffic and prevent traffic congestion. Now, this huge capital investment is why so many pundits are predicting a new wave of AI software applications are on the horizon. And tracking venture capital investment may not be providing us the entire picture of all of the startups that are out there working on AI products. Because AI makes software programming faster and easier for people who don't know how to code. So creative founders can now create a working application with just a laptop, an API code, and a good idea. They don't always need a lot of employees and office space. And they may not need venture capital to get started. So there are more AI startups out there than the level of venture capital investment implies. To better understand today's AI startup environment, I thought we should talk with somebody who's living in it, somebody who understands the dynamics and the opportunities. So I'm thrilled to have Josh Levine with us today. Josh is a co-founder and the CEO of Thorian AI, a tech company based in Austin, Texas. He's an experienced tech leader who's already built and sold an AI company and is well on his way with a second. So, Josh, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, Josh, you have a master's degree in public policy from the University of Texas at Austin. That's not the normal background most people think of when they try to imagine a tech startup leader. So tell me your story.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, master's degree in public policy, and from my perspective, it was always about using public policy as a lens to understand how the world works. So I was always interested in how organizations, processes, workflows fit together like a puzzle. And that drew me to public policy because public policy is at the center of the government, the private sector, the people who make up our society all come together around the public sector and around public policy. So that was kind of my foray into the world. But the entrepreneurial instinct around trying to figure stuff out and trying to build something kind of already always existed for me. So I specialized in public finance because that was a way to extend that storytelling, use numbers to tell stories about how organizations worked. And then from there, spent 7 years working in finance. Realized that finance wasn't for me. I enjoyed the work itself, but the culture itself didn't fit how fast I wanted to move. I wanted to be more independent. I wanted to be more creative. And I started my first company in 2019. Haven't really done anything business related before in terms of starting my own thing. I didn't have a business background, but started in a space that I understood really well. So it was education technology. That was what I was focused on, the education space when I was in my final years in finance. And so that was a nice jumping off point. I at least had some expertise, even if I hadn't built a startup before. So that company was kind of a proving ground for me. It pivoted multiple times, brought in a co-founder kind of late in that game and changed the company, got some grant funding from the NIH, and ultimately didn't work out, but was a really interesting experience, really positive experience for me. My second company, I started with a much stronger point of view on what I wanted to do and how I wanted to use technology to solve big problems. That second company was in the mergers and acquisition space, and that's where I got acquainted with AI. So that started pre-large language model, 2020, 2021 timeframe. So before GPT 2.0 hit the scene and sort of changed the whole game for everybody. And we were really interested in how AI could be used to match people and potential acquisition targets with each other and use some of that complex computing power to do that matching. So we were really already pretty deep in AI when GPT started to get really big, and we're really well positioned to take advantage of it. And of course, in the early days, it wasn't really enough to just have a large language model embedded in your work. You really needed to understand how it worked. You needed to understand its limitations. And it wasn't really quite good enough to do the things that we needed it to do in those early days. So as we moved through that company, ended up selling that company last year. And I started Thorian AI, which is my current entrepreneurial venture with my CTO from that company. So he and I, really hit it off when we were working together in that firm, and had a point of view about where we think AI is going, in a more applied way, less chatbots, more software focused, more direct outcomes, and more niche in a lot of cases. And so we saw the world the same way, have very similar values in terms of how I wanted to make a difference in the world, and decided to team up and build another one.
So tell us a little bit about Thorian AI. Give us your elevator pitch. What does Thorian AI do?
So what we specialize in is processes that have a lot of data on one side. It could be really complicated data, really messy data, a set of rules that govern how that data is used, and a defined output that you're getting by passing the data through those rules and achieving that output. With my background in public policy, a lot of the customers you work with are government adjacent. So it'll be finance firms that are reporting to the government. It'll be political candidates that are automating their campaign finance reporting. It'll be work with larger organizations with big data sets that they need untangling to use for particular use cases. So, for example, a Head Start organization that needs to report on the community within kind of a custom geographic boundary, what's going on, what are the childcare service levels in those areas, that kind of stuff, where really grabbing a lot of data, using that data more effectively becomes really important. And for us on the back end, it's not so much just running these questions through a large language model. We have a particular process that we use to manage the data, get it in the right format, simplify it, break it into small pieces. And we have AI agents that then specialize in specific data tasks. So they're the ones that are then taking the data points with highly specific instructions. Those instructions are coming from the rules, so the regulatory context that they have, specific context and rules, and then creating an output that is then checked by a second set of agents, and as well as a human checking as well.
I can see how helpful this would be for any entity, a nonprofit, a business, as you said, a candidate who's running for office, all the people who have to do government reporting, which can be quite onerous. And they have all this data, but maybe not a huge staff to do it. I could see how helpful this would be to have a company that can help organize and make sure is done in the right way and accurately. But why'd you focus on this area? Why this area in particular?
Yeah, so this area came pretty naturally to me. I mean, so for my last role in finance, I was reviewing a lot of really big legal documents, trying to understand how different securities worked, digging in on the details, and those details, the rules really matter. And we knew that in a world where AI is so hot, where people are really promoting very broad solutions with AI, it can be really challenging for people to really understand, hey, is this real? Are these guys really solving a problem for me? How do I see them within my own workflows? And so for us, we were basically saying, let's use the place where we're experts, where we know more than the market, and apply this technology in a way that can actually help the people that we understand. So as an entrepreneur, you think about building your customer personas and your initial customer profiles. How do we think about the people that we're going to solve, not just, what money they have or what job they have, but what do they think about? What do they worry about? What does success look like for them in their careers? And it's funny, you think about AI as being this very broad-based technology, like I said, the fundamentals of entrepreneurship really apply almost more than ever now, in the sense that you have to find a customer that wants to pay you for a specific product. You have to provide that product at a very high level of quality, and you have to do it with a team that's smaller than a big company's team. And AI has made that much easier, in the sense that we can scale our team much further with many fewer people, which opens the door to a lot of different pathways, which I'm sure we're going to touch on later. But it's been very much building that expertise and deploying that expertise live for the audience. One thing that we've talked about in our pre-meetings is that the average age of a billionaire startup founder is 45. We hear a lot about the whiz kids coming out of the big universities, or the tech unicorns that are founded by kids that dropped out of college. And in reality, most people who do well in entrepreneurship have a background in something, have a perspective on how the world works, and their startup is really the success of that vision and that expertise that they've built out over time, as applied to a specific set of customers.
I love how you took your background in public policy and in public finance and that knowledge base that you developed of the customers and what their problems are, and developed a customized solution for them. I mean, again, that's core to entrepreneurship, of understanding who your customer is and what their pain points are and how you could solve it for them. Yeah, I love that.
100%.
Now, you talk about and I would love to hear a little bit more about your technical co-founder. Who's your technical co-founder?
So my technical co-founder's name is Constantine. He and I met when we were running the M&A company that I mentioned previously. He's actually a childhood friend of my co-founder from that business. And what was funny about I hadn't really spent a lot of time with like extremely technical people before I met Constantine. And what was really clear, or when I had, we were on different wavelengths. And one of the things about Constantine that I really appreciated was that he and I really connected on a personal and values level. So Constantine, is an ex-journalist who uses data to tell stories and uncover sort of what's happening behind the scenes in certain problems, and he's been doing that his whole life. And so for him, data and information was really technology was really a means to an end, in the sense of, I need to understand this, I need to break it down into small pieces, I need to be able to tell this story. And the stories that we were telling each other about the world were very, very similar, even though our backgrounds are very different. So he and I hit it off almost immediately. And it was an easy transition. I've worked on teams that have been really, really tough. Teams where people don't get along, teams where people don't see eye to eye, teams where people's values, levels of conservatism versus aggression, levels of the sort of ways people like to work are conflict with each other. And some of those things you work through, some of those things you fix, and you mature over time. And sometimes you find someone who sees the world like you, and it really is a seamless fit. And I've been very lucky that I found a person that's not just a seamless fit for me, personality wise and values wise, but also capability wise, in the sense that he's much more technical than me. He really understands how all of these technical pieces work and can deploy them with extremely high levels of accuracy and finesse in a way that I couldn't do. And one thing with AI in particular is AI is sort of flattening the curve in a lot of ways for technical development. So we see people who don't have coding backgrounds building whole apps in a single weekend with things like Claude Code and Codex, and it allows us to build minimum viable products, the small little test cases that allow us to see if our product is going to work. We can build those very quickly and very, very well without really the need of a big technical team. And yet, what I see, having worked with someone who is deeply technical, is there's still a pretty sizable gap in terms of what you can do when you really understand how data science works, how data engineering works, and how coding works, versus someone who doesn't. And Constantine is now, he says he works 10x, 50x faster than he could before AI, but it's still an expert technical person deploying those tools with the maximum amount of efficiency.
Right. So I love hearing these stories about how AI can make you so much more efficient, especially in areas that you may not even have deep expertise. Do you guys have a lot of employees and a big office in Austin, or a huge team doing all the work?
Well, we're the answer to that is no. This is my the spare bedroom in my house in Austin. It is just me in here. Constantine is in Prague, so we're pretty much a fully remote company, and we built our relationship basically fully remotely. We've met in person before, which was wonderful. And even if you're a fully remote team, you have to meet in person at least a few times. But that's another thing that's really nice about building with this type of technology, is that you don't have to have a big team. You don't need to all be, huddled around a computer at 11 p.m. doing work. You can work very asynchronously. And we've seen these new ways of working evolving since the pandemic. And I think that there's been a shift back recently. So people are heading back into the office, and people are, abandoning some of these remote working environments because they didn't work for them. And for us, it worked. And, this is not a values-based judgment in terms of, oh, remote work is better than in-person work or vice versa. It's really about finding a way to work with the people that you want to work with really, really well. And for us, we haven't needed that. And with AI in particular, we can move and code so quickly that we haven't needed to bring on a lot of people. So it allows us to say, okay, well, the two of us are going to handle the core functions of this business. And, as the less technical person, I'll do sales and marketing and strategy and product development, in the sense of product management, excuse me, not product development, product management, in the sense I'm helping him think through some of his challenges, and he'll do all the technical building and the creation and that creative part of that process. And it works super well. But then he'll bring on a bunch of AI agents to help automate pieces of that coding process. We'll run parallel sequences at the same time, working on different tasks with something like a codex, for example, with sets of instructions, and that allows us to be really efficient. Now we're hitting a point where we've been very broad as a company, and we're starting to narrow in on a few more specific use cases. And as we get narrower and narrower, finding that industry specific expertise, both from, primarily even from a sales and relationships perspective, is really helpful. I'm lucky that I'm an extrovert and I have a pretty good network and I can move through a bunch of different communities pretty easily, but that's not, you can't replace, expert experience in a specific spot in a specific space. And so probably the next person we hire is going to be an expert in one of the spaces that we're looking to dig deep on.
And I'm hearing you talk about how AI is kind of changing a little bit the startup model, because you can do so much with artificial intelligence and you don't need huge staffs to develop a viable product. It almost changes your relationship with venture capital, right?
I mean, that's a great segue and a really good question, because you're right. The venture capital space is sort of built on this idea of you need money to scale a company. And you need money to scale a company because you need to hire people. You need to hire developers and you need to hire salespeople and you need to pay to build marketing campaigns and pay to build a lot of additional pieces. And what we've found is that it's just not necessary with where we are with the company right now. That doesn't mean that, for example, if we go deep in a space, we might need some capital to compete with another player. If we decide, hey, we're going to go in this space, there's an incumbent and we need to attend 20 different conferences in order to meet people. You can't do that with no money. Obviously, fortunately, we're generating good revenue on that, so we haven't had to need to go out and raise money. But fundamentally, venture capital is a means to an end, right? Venture capital is highly celebrated. It's really public. We measure company successes based on how much they're able to raise, because that's a heuristic that we as members of the public have to evaluate companies themselves. What we found is that unless you need the money, right, it comes with a set of trade-offs. So you bring in money, it gives you opportunities, but it comes with trade-offs: less control, harder to exit at the end, fewer outs. And if you can build really well and generate revenue at a healthy rate to pay yourself to afford all the things you need to from a technical and from a business development standpoint, it could be really beneficial for you as an entrepreneur not to raise venture capital. I'll give you an example. So venture capital math basically says that every individual investment, I'm going to be really broad here. These are heuristics and basic numbers, but every investment that a venture capital firm makes needs to be able to return the entire size of the fund. So you're often looking for like a 100x on that investment, return on investment. So let's say you raise, $1 million from a venture capital firm. They're betting that you could get big enough to to have a $100 million exit. And so as a founder, to get from for 1 million to 100 million, there is a substantial amount of dilution that might need to go through that in terms of what you're able to hold on to yourself. You're going to raise additional rounds. You're going to have to grow really, really big. The alternative is, let's say you don't raise any money and you get an offer for a $20 million acquisition at a certain point. Now, if I own my whole company, or my co-founder and I own our whole company, we could take that offer. That's life-changing money for us. But if we had raised from, a venture capitalist that was expecting $100 million, that's not such a great success for them. And so to the extent that they might have a board seat or things like that, your optionality in that circumstance is a lot less. So that's not to say that it's not that valid or viable to go that route, and it doesn't help people. It certainly helps companies that are trying to get really, really big. And we, of course, would also love to be really, really big, but your flexibility is increased when you can build without having to raise.
How nice to be able to build with somebody you trust and you like, and to keep control as long as possible. And you guys are the ones making the decisions as long as possible. I mean, how wonderful is that? Which is a nice benefit of working with artificial intelligence.
It's the most fun I've had as an entrepreneur, for sure. I think I've done this. This is my third time doing this. This has definitely it's been freeing, and we feel like we're really like everything is very open. We have a lot of opportunity ahead of us. It's been really exciting.
You talked a few minutes ago about some of the different use cases for Thorian AI, and you talked a little bit about y'all are studying some different areas that you may go into. For what you can tell us, what's next for your company?
So it's interesting because the model for a company and what it looks like is also a little bit different with AI, and I think it can be a little bit different. So, for example, we've thought about saying, hey, there's a public policy niche that could be really good for us in terms of using public policy data, deploying it, doing FOIA request automation. I mean, there's all these sort of things, maybe some bigger markets that we could go into and go super deep on, and do really well with that. I also think that you could go very very niche in a few cases. Not that I mean FOIA, responses is already pretty niche, but you could go very very niche in terms of, okay, we're going to do this type of report for this type of firm, and we're going to be the very best in the world at this one thing. And if you do that a few different times, you can build a pretty sizable company. So let's say that in a venture capital world, VC is not going to invest in your company unless you have a multi-billion-dollar total addressable market. With AI, if you can build without raising, then you can say, well, I'm going to get into this $10 million market. I'm going to own half of it. And there's no one else playing in this space, but we know that there's a need based on our persona work and our customer interviews. Then you can go in and say, I'm going to own 5 million of this market. I'm going to own 10 million of this other market. And all of a sudden, through experience and by building in a way that adds and compounds on each other, you could build a really big and successful company that way. That's kind of a hybrid services technology company that can look a little bit different than what you might expect from a traditional software company, but also can scale really well and could do a lot of interesting things. Now, there's a downside to that, right? If you spread yourself too thin, you might lose your ability to be an expert in that space. You might get distracted. How you manage your development hours, how you manage your business development hours. These are all challenges when you go broad that you don't have when you go narrow. And I think that as a founder, I'm always very careful and thinking about these types of problems all the time. I'm not saying that I have it perfectly figured out yet, but what I'm saying is understanding what the inherent benefits and trade-offs of your chosen business model is really important. So if you're thinking about going into entrepreneurship, figuring out, okay, what do you want out of this? What are you trying to build? How do you want to build? Who do you want to build with? What customers do you want to serve? What problems do you want to solve? Structure a life and a set of decisions around those choices, and that'll get you pretty far.
And I love that. That's I appreciate you getting into just advice, because somebody listening may be wanting to do startup work, and you've obviously have a lot of deep experience in this and a really neat, interesting story. What advice would you have for somebody who's out there and maybe has an idea of something that they may want to try to build a company for? What advice do you have for them?
So I think be an expert in something, learn. So I think that learning how to do something that you really enjoy is important. Not that, the thing I really enjoy is filling out government forms. We're really trying to fix this because no one enjoys that stuff. But more find a space that you really like where you empathize with and really value the people that are in it. That empathy will come across when you're working with your customers. Try to build in an authentic way that lets you do something that gives you energy every single day. I would say that your profile, just because you have a certain background or you look a certain way or you come from a certain school or something like that, the AI revolution is really flattening a lot of this, a lot of the requirements. So from my perspective, right, I look even 5 years ago, my conversations with venture capital, you would see a lot of people using heuristics like, okay, did they go to Harvard or MIT? And if they didn't, we're not interested. And there are hundreds of firms out there like that. And I think one of the lessons from this current AI movement is that because you don't need to be a Harvard trained engineer in order to build an app. And you certainly don't need to hire a whole bunch of Harvard trained engineers in order to build an app. You can really you can build something great with whatever background you have, doubling down on the things that you're good at, finding teammates to help you cover the things that you're not good at. And, even something like, I have a liberal arts-ish degree, right? I went to college for political science. I did economics and philosophy in college. I have a public policy degree. Like, this is not, like you said at the top, this is not a traditional background for entrepreneurship. And I think that being able to think critically, being able to have empathy for others, and being able to understand how other people think is going to be really, really important, particularly as AI changes the way that we all code and AI changes the way that we think about our work. There's this conversation around what work is going to be replaced by AI. And this is this ongoing question. And, is it going to be net negative or net positive? We see varying and conflicting reports about that. Ultimately, and this is what when I talk to students, this is what I usually say. I'll say, look, every AI process has a human asking a question at the top and a human evaluating an answer at the bottom, even if AI is asking questions and evaluating answers along the way. Being able to think critically about how stuff works, ask that question a little bit better, evaluate the output, and push a model and a workflow in a direction that you think is different and really helpful. That kind of critical thinking really matters. So I think that in a world where coding is done by AI, critical thinking is going to be done by people with liberal arts degrees, public policy degrees, people who have deep experience understanding other people. And it's going to be a really interesting world going forward. And I think a lot of non-traditional founders are going to be really successful. I know that's a little self-serving.
I love your story because of exactly that, of the non-traditional founders. And I also love your liberal arts background, because we're hearing and reading so much more about how critical thinking and judgment, being able to read and write, and being able to critique writing and to understand the basics is so important now. And so I love your background of having so much experience in education in the liberal arts piece, because it definitely is informing your work now.
100%.
Josh, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. I love hearing your story and about your company and your insights on how AI is changing startups as well as everything else.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been great to be able to chat, and hopefully the audience finds some value. My email is josh@thorian.ai. Feel free to reach out if you have questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Josh.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you spending the time with us and learning a little bit more about how artificial intelligence is changing AI startups. Drop me a comment. Like the show, tell me what you think. And join me next time when we talk about how artificial intelligence and other technology is changing our careers and our lives.